Hello everyone. Today we are going to read lesson 7, Fun at School. Mr. Beard was a very fine fellow. Nothing pleased him more than to do a good deed for others. One morning at breakfast he began to smile. "That's it," he cried. "That's just what we animals need. A school." "What is a school?" asked Mrs. Bear fondly. "A school, my dear," said Mr. Bear, "is a place to learn things. Everyone likes to learn things." Mrs. Bear nodded. "I would like to learn to make cakes and cookies as Mrs. Rabbit does." "You see," said Mr. Bear, "I would give anything to learn to dive like Grandpa Otter." Then Mr. Bear hurried off to see what his neighbors thought of his idea. "A school!" they cried, and their eyes shone like the stars. "We would love to learn things at school," they said. "School begins tomorrow at 9 o'clock sharp," declared Mr. Bear. Mr. Bear returned home very happy. "We'll have a fine school for learning things and fine pupils to learn them," he said. Mrs. Bear smiled. "And a fine teacher to teach them." "What did you say?" asked Mr. Bear. Mrs. Bear repeated her words. This set Mr. Bear thinking. "But we don't have a teacher," he cried. "I guess a school wasn't such a good idea after all." He felt quite sad. Just then Mrs. Bear had a lovely idea. Without a word to her husband, she went off to see all the neighbors. Next morning, a little before 9 o'clock, Mrs. Bear said, "Time for school." "But," said Mr. Bear, "you can't have a school without a teacher." "Come along," said Mrs. Bear, hiding a secret smile. When they reached school, Mr. Bear stared and stared. There stood before him all his neighbors, washed and combed and ready for school. "But where is the teacher?" asked Mr. Bear. "We are all going to be teachers," laughed Mrs. Bear. And so they were. The whole morning they taught and they learned all kind of things. Mr. Bear gave everyone a lesson in fishing. Grandpa Otter's diving class was very exciting. Mrs. Rabbit took the cooking class. Mrs. Elephant taught the animals to paint. Everyone admired how she held the painting brush in her trunk. Mr. Kangaroo's high jump class was great fun. Everyone agreed that school had been Mr. Bear's best idea so far. Nobody would ever miss a day of it. This was a reading of our lesson 7, Fun at School. If you have any doubt or query, you can ask me in the comment section below. Also, you can find the links to other lessons in the description box below. Thank you, everyone.